Hey there guys, welcome to part 2 of my flow state series. Here I'll be discussing flow hacks you can use to increase your performance based on what we established in the previous video. If you haven't watched that part, you'll still be able to benefit from this, though I do recommend checking it out. Otherwise, let's dive straight into it. Oh, and a quick heads up first, this is now going to be a 3-part series. In part 3, I'll be discussing the use of nootropic stacks and transcranial direct current stimulation to achieve flow. But for now, flow hacks. So if you're performing suboptimally, then there are likely 2 explanations based on what we discussed before. Either you're not trying hard enough, or you're not engaged enough, your mind is wandering, or you're overly stressed, second guessing yourself and aren't in the moment as a result. This is when we're shaking and overly anxious. Effective flow hacks should be aimed at helping you to psych yourself up when you're distracted and to center and ground yourself when you're panicking. So to quickly engage a sense of calm during intense situations, there are a few things we can do. Our pathway to the autonomic nervous system is through our breathing, which helps to stimulate the vagal nerve. One method used by Navy SEALs to control the fight or flight response is something called box breathing or foursquare breathing. And what's very interesting is that this form of rhythmic and controlled breathing is also very similar to exercises recommended by the HeartMath Institute to induce coherence. By breathing more rhythmically, you can also hopefully make your heart rate variability pattern more rhythmic and thereby potentially increase the amount of DHEA to help you stay in a calmly aroused state. To use box breathing, you simply inhale for the count of 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds again, then repeat. Breathing through your nose while you're doing this will also help to increase nitric oxide production, which widens blood vessels and helps improve oxygen delivery to the brain, and apparently humming during this may further help to enhance the effect. If you find yourself feeling stressed and making mistakes as a result, shaking and feeling sick, try breathing more rhythmically, gently and through your nose. Just being more aware of your breath helps a lot. I spoke in a previous video about another technique you could use to engage calm called wide angle vision. This helps to increase present moment focus by bringing in more visual information and at the same time improves reaction times and a state of calm. Speaking with several martial artists after making that video, it seems that this really is one of the best things you can do to improve your focus and state of flow during sparring in particular. Avoid focusing on limbs and trying to anticipate the opponent's movements, instead watch their body as a whole. Again then, when you find yourself flinching and underperforming, try engaging your peripheral vision and taking the entire scene in. Watch my video on this for more information. Apparently, relaxing your tongue and lower jaw can also help to induce the calmer theta brainwaves that are associated with flow states. This makes sense considering our stereotypical image of the slack-jawed individual. Try it now and you'll find it's much easier to just zone out, but be careful with this technique if you're in a competitive sport, as it could make you more likely to clamp your teeth together or bite your tongue off, which will take you right out of a flow state. But really, our stress response is mostly controlled by our thoughts. If you don't believe me, then imagine that you're camping in the woods and you hear a rustling in the bush and you know it's a tiger. Your heart rate will increase, your pupils will dilate, you'll pour with sweat, but then the tiger emerges and it turns out to be a kitten. So it was your expectation that caused the fight or flight response, not the reality, your interpretation of the situation. And the thing is that we imagine tigers all around us all the time. Not literal tigers, unless you do live in the jungle, but other threats and dangers that aren't really as bad as we think they are. For instance, when speaking in public, you imagine being booed off the stage if you stutter, but very few crowds are really that cruel, and does it really matter anyways? The difference between being psyched up for a competition and experience performance anxiety is in your focus. Are you focused on the event itself, or are you focused on what everyone will think of you if you fail? This is why sports psychologists the world over encourage their athletes to be goal-oriented, yes, to focus on the outcome to motivate themselves to work harder, but also to leave their anxieties in the changing room. The best athletes reportedly view competition as part of the process rather than being a be-all and end-all. And of course, if your brain is worrying about what the future holds for you if you fail, then it's using up your cognitive reserves that would be better employed elsewhere. It's likely that this might lead to increased activity in the wrong parts of your brain, so stay in the moment and worry just about doing your very best at that time. This is a common misconception about flow states and neuroscience generally that I forgot to touch on last time, that we exhibit one kind of brainwaves across our entire brain, or that neurochemicals affect every brain region the same. In truth, it's far more complex than that, and a flow state is like the result of a complex pattern of brainwaves and neurochemicals in specific brain regions. You can have alpha brainwaves in one part of your brain, theta in another, gamma in another. Achieving flow might be about achieving excitability in the right places. Another piece of useful self-talk is to remind yourself that your fight or flight response is not a bad thing. We've been conditioned to think of it as a bad thing, and this actually makes us panic in the wrong way. This is why people who experience panic attacks are told not to try and fight them or suppress them, but to accept them and observe them. When you feel intense stress, welcome it. It's going to help you. The adrenaline is making you stronger and quicker and heightening your senses. Studies show that adrenaline can increase strength by 31% or more. Your sympathetic nervous system is not the enemy.
Right now, you could run faster and you could fight harder. You could jump higher than ever in your life. And you are so alert, it's like you can slow down time. What's wrong with scared? Scared is a superpower.
Techniques like this are an example of cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. This is a psychotherapeutic technique that is used by psychologists to treat conditions like phobia, anxiety disorders and OCD. It's my belief that the same principles can also be applied to sports psychology, productivity and general performance. I plan on doing a whole video on this soon, as CBT has helped me and others I know immensely, but the basics involve observing your own feelings and thoughts by using mindfulness and then cognitive restructuring techniques to change your thoughts and your focus to things that are more conducive to health and, in our case, optimal performance. These include techniques such as thought checking, which tests the validity of your thoughts. Are people really going to boo you off the stage? The next time you're in a situation where you need to perform optimally, try assessing where your focus is, what's on your mind and what is helping and hindering your performance. Remind yourself that your fight or flight response isn't the threat in itself, remind yourself to breathe, remind yourself to focus on the moment, and that the outcome doesn't matter. Ask yourself if your fears are really valid or if you're inflating them in your mind. With enough practice, it may eventually be possible to control your own physiological response by being more sensitive to different changes in your physiology and your mindset. After all, some people are able to trigger an orgasm with their thoughts alone. The theory is that these individuals are so in tune with their own feelings and responses that they can work themselves up to that state. While that might sound like a random thing to drop in here, my point is that if this is possible, then surely triggering a flow state is also possible. Likewise, studies show that simply being more aware of our heart rates using biofeedback techniques can eventually help us to begin to control them. Again, I'll probably touch on this more in future. So these techniques can all help you to find calm the next time you're in a highly stressed situation. Rather than fighting the increased heart rate, embrace it, breathe calmly and become psyched up, not psyched out. But what if you have the opposite problem? What if your mind is wandering because you're not engaged enough with what's happening? In that case, you have a few options. We've seen already that breath can be used to control your autonomic nervous system, and as it turns out, the Wim Hof method is able to increase adrenaline. More on that soon. You can likewise also use CBT techniques once again. Remind yourself why what you're doing is important and why you have to win. Visualize the end goal that you're striving for and feel the emotional motivation for why you're doing whatever it is you're doing in the first place. At the same time, endeavour to do your best. Part of the reason we go through life in a daze is simply that we aren't challenged enough or engaged enough. If you do the same thing at work every single day, have the same routine of ironing and making lunch, how can you be expected to engage in the moment or to perform your best? Of course your mind's going to wander. Again, this could be a matter of thinking about the situation in the right way. If the task is too easy, then try doing it faster or more perfectly, or whilst adding arbitrary rules and restrictions. This is called gamification. Going faster, or over speed training as it's also known, is a particularly interesting way to make any regular task harder. And we can see how this affects cognition by driving on a motorway at 70 miles per hour, then coming off onto a regular 30 miles per hour road. How much slower does the latter seem now? This is also why the flow triggers suggested by Stephen Kotler, such as deep embodiment, which means moving around a lot, rich environments, which means not being in a drab office, and immediate feedback, could all be helpful. They help to make a task more interesting and inherently engaging. Though I do think his view oversimplifies the subject a lot, and you can't always be snowboarding down a mountain. A related concept is awe cultivation, seeking out scenes that are inspiring that could help us to increase activity across our brains. But again, that's a topic for another time. You can also try being more mindful whilst carrying out tasks. Mindful washing up is actually a thing, but I prefer mindful running. This just means being more in the moment, focusing on your body as you perform that task. And for more on how to focus on a creative or productive task when your mind just wants to wander, check out my video titled Focus. Okay, so all those techniques can help to remain calmer when you're panicking and to be more focused when your mind is wandering. These are acute hacks that you can use to help trigger flow in the moment. But in the long term, if you want to improve your ability to focus and to remain calm, then there are a few things better than practicing meditation. Meditation essentially involves practicing focusing your mind, whether that means emptying it out or focusing on a mantra or your breath. Gradually, you'll learn to become better at ignoring distracting thoughts and even rising above emotions that aren't conducive to your optimal performance. Combined with mindfulness, this is likely one of the most powerful tools to help you be in greater flow more of the time. Though I'd like to interject at this point and just quickly remind you that flow is not the only useful mental state. Sometimes daydreaming and activating your default mode network can be useful for creativity and long-term planning. It's not always great to be in the moment, there's nothing wrong with being in your own head, this is what makes us human. Optimal performance is about being able to switch between mental states and be in the right one at the right time. Meditation will help you to do this. You can also train yourself to deal with stress better by simply exposing yourself to extreme stress more often. This is the precise technique used by special forces to effectively desensitize their combatants to the stress response. Tim Ferriss recommends doing something similar by lying down in a public place to expose yourself to extreme social pressure. It's embarrassing basically. But I can think of ways that you could be way more embarrassing in public. We also experience a stress response when we're low on oxygen, which may be why deep divers have a similar parasympathetic response to the special forces, and likewise when we're very cold. I wouldn't recommend trying to train yourself to adapt to a sympathetic nervous response by restricting oxygen, but getting outside of your comfort zone and doing things that get your heart pumping is recommended. And while doing this, maintain mindfulness and notice how it feels. This is similar to a technique in cognitive behavioural therapy called fear testing, where you expose yourself to your worst fears and thereby prove to yourself that they aren't worth fearing. Practice is crucial for enhancing your likelihood of getting into flow. If you're still learning a technique or sport, then it'll take more conscious thought in order to execute it. This is why, seemingly counterintuitively, experts and masters in specific fields actually use fewer cognitive resources. This is called neural efficiency, and it bears remarkable similarity to flow states. Of course, every martial artist knows that they need to practice the same moves over and over again so that they become second nature when they need them, while sparring or fighting.
And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself.
And you can also practice focus and flow themselves. Practice remaining completely focused and in the moment, and you'll become better at remaining there. Studies show that neural efficiency doesn't just apply to learning skills, but also becoming more efficient in the way that you use your brain generally. By training your working memory, for instance, you can increase neural efficiency across all tasks that involve non-verbal reasoning. Again, meditation seems to help in a similar way. So that's an awful lot to take in, but hopefully it's given you some interesting topics to research further. Practice mindfulness, practice being in the moment, start meditating, and learn to control your breathing whilst engaging wide-angle vision. Welcome and use your physiological response, practice your art and push yourself outside your comfort zone. Do all that and you'll be in flow more often. I do think there's a kind of higher level though. You hear a lot of people who manage to be focused for a few hours claiming that they're in flow. But I think everyone chasing flow believes that it can be greater than that. We're chasing those moments where time really slows to a crawl, those rare instances where we gain seemingly superhuman reflexes and decision making. I believe that this is most likely due to an exaggerated adrenal response, and I don't know how we might trigger that at will. But practicing everything we've discussed here means you'll stand a better chance of it happening and of being ready when it does come. And of course, if you found this video interesting, then please hit subscribe so you won't miss out on part 3, where I'll be trying out flow state inducing nootropic stacks and looking at the role of transcranial direct current stimulation and what that might mean for the topic. And visit the article that goes with this video linked below. There I'll go into even more depth and include links to all the studies and reports touched on here. So thanks a ton for watching guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.